The mainstream media is in a state of quiet panic this evening. Across Britain's television networks, the same few clips play again and again the Prime Minister's face, drawn with anger, the pound sterling falling sharply, and news presenters repeating one word with weary astonishment. Chaos. They describe the symptoms of a government in crisis. They show us the political drama, the collapsing markets, the protests in the streets. Yet what none of them are addressing is the cause. The quiet but seismic act that set this entire chain of events in motion. That act came not from Parliament nor from the courts, but from the palace itself. At 9:47 this morning, King Charles III authorised the release of a single document, a formal legal instrument invoking a power unused for nearly 2 centuries. It is called the Constitutional Oversight Prerogative, and it originates from the constitutional crisis of 1834. Until today, most assumed it had no place in modern Britain. The power itself is precise. It allows a monarch in conditions of national paralysis or moral breach to dismiss a government that has lost the nation's confidence, even if that government still commands a majority in Parliament. It was last exercised by King William IV, who judged his ministers incapable of governing responsibly. Since that moment, every monarch has chosen restraint. Even Queen Elizabeth II, through wars and economic turmoil, never once considered using it. The prerogative was treated as an artefact, an antique mechanism locked in the vault of history. That changed this morning. According to senior palace sources, the king summoned 2 constitutional scholars from Oxford and his former private secretary, Lord G. for an unscheduled consultation at Buckingham Palace. The discussion, lasting just over 90 minutes, did not focus on the headlines of the day, but on the principles that underpin the Constitution itself. Those present concluded that the conditions first cited in 1834 had, in their view, been met once again. A government that had, in law and morality, lost its legitimacy to govern. What triggered the meeting was not a political scandal, but a moral one. The palace had received evidence from military charities and NHS whistleblowers showing the human consequences of recent budget decisions. At the centre of the files was the case of James Patterson, a 71-year-old Falklands veteran from Manchester. His long-scheduled hip operation had been postponed by 8 months because of what internal memoranda described as non-critical budget reallocations. He now lives in constant pain, watching his grandson's football matches from a wheelchair. Beside his file lay cabinet expense reports showing that 3 senior ministers had spent £47,000 of public funds on a 3-day visit to Brussels, including luxury hotels and extravagant dinners. The contrast, advisers said, spoke for itself and it shaped the King's judgment. Late yesterday afternoon, the Privy Council assembled for what was expected to be a routine procedural meeting. Instead, the King departed from custom. Those present say he spoke with unusual firmness, reminding his ministers that the government exists to serve the public good, not private ambition. The statement was brief but historic. And when the meeting concluded, the King signed the formal document invoking the 1834 precedent. It was delivered in person to number 10 Downing Street by the King's private secretary. Witnesses described the Prime Minister's reaction as one of disbelief. The smile faded as he read the heading. Constitutional Oversight Prerogative, 1834 precedent invoked. According to those present, he slammed the document on his desk and demanded that the Attorney General challenge it immediately. But the advice that followed was unequivocal. The royal prerogative is not subject to judicial review. It exists beyond the reach of the courts. With no legal route open, the Prime Minister turned to politics. He began preparing a public campaign portraying the King's move as an undemocratic coup. Yet while that strategy was being drafted, another development was already underway, one that would undermine him completely. Behind closed doors, the Prince of Wales had been holding private discussions of his own. 2 meetings took place at Kensington Palace earlier this week, attended by senior Conservative figures and representatives from Reform UK. The meetings were not recorded on official schedules. Those present say the discussions focused on duty, national service, and the state of public trust in government. One participant later described the Prince's words as a call to moral responsibility. Whatever the precise content, the result was clear. The heir to the throne had aligned himself with the king's position. The effects were immediate. Within an hour of the document reaching Downing Street, news leaked from within the government. Markets reacted instantly. The pound fell more than 2% and billions were wiped from the London Stock Exchange. International investors, long accustomed to Britain's political stability, saw the headlines, Monarch moves against Prime Minister, and began pulling capital from the UK. But it was not only the markets that moved. The Labour Party itself began to fracture. Senior ministers, alarmed by the Prime Minister's defiance, started briefing journalists anonymously. One overheard in a Commons corridor said simply, "He's lost the plot." By the afternoon, the crisis had reached social media. The hashtag Defend the King trended not only in Britain but worldwide, reaching number 1 in 14 countries within hours. What began online soon took to the streets. Demonstrations were reported in Liverpool, Birmingham and Newcastle, many of them in traditional Labour heartlands. The chant was short and direct, respect the crown or resign. Inside number 10, the atmosphere turned poisonous. Civil servants spoke of tension bordering on hysteria. Ministers who once competed for the Prime Minister's attention now avoided his office. The Cabinet Secretary described the situation privately as a pressure cooker, seconds from rupture. Even the Chancellor, long considered his closest ally, was seen leaving a meeting in tears. Then came a development that few could have predicted. At 3:15, cameras outside Buckingham Palace captured the arrival of former Prime Minister Tony Blair. He entered through a side gate and remained inside for more than an hour. Officially, no record of that meeting exists. Unofficially, senior sources suggest Blair was asked to advise the monarch on how far the Crown could act within constitutional limits without provoking an outright political breakdown. The symbolism was unmistakable, the King consulting a former Labour leader, while the current one fought for survival. As the evening unfolded, further leaks added to the Prime Minister's isolation. Internal Labour polling, now verified by senior party figures, showed that a clear majority of Labour voters, 68%, opposed any confrontation with the monarchy. The Prime Minister had seen the data 3 weeks earlier and pressed ahead regardless. That revelation proved devastating. Within hours, Labour's standing in the polls collapsed. A Snap YouGov survey placed the party at 23%, the Conservatives at 29%, and Reform UK surging to 27%, its highest figure on record. For the first time, Reform UK, once dismissed as a protest movement, appeared within reach of forming a government. Meanwhile, the Prime Minister's authority drained away. His cabinet stopped defending him publicly. Even his most loyal allies began forming private groups under discreet names such as Stabilised Labour Now and Lifeboat. Discussions turned to the question not of if he would fall, but when. The financial situation worsened. The Governor of the Bank of England made an emergency call to the Treasury, warning that unless the crisis was resolved within 48 hours, Britain faced imminent credit rating downgrades from all 3 major agencies. That officials feared would push up borrowing costs and mortgage rates almost overnight. For the first time in years, the phrase national emergency appeared in internal Treasury communications. The Prime Minister's response was defiance. In a late-night meeting, he reportedly told aides, "If the King wants to play politics, I'll remind him who really governs this country." According to one witness, the room fell silent. By dawn, the government's communications teams were exhausted, morale broken, and discipline gone. Briefings to the press contradicted one another. Senior advisors stopped attending meetings. It was, in the words of one insider, a government disintegrating from the inside out. Across Whitehall, attention shifted to Monday's recall of Parliament. A no-confidence motion had already been submitted, not by the opposition benches, but by Labour's own backbenchers. The debate, when it comes, will decide not simply the future of a Prime Minister, but perhaps the future of Britain's unwritten constitution itself. On Tuesday evening, the King is expected to address the nation directly, a step almost without precedent in modern times. Palace sources describe the speech as one that will speak of duty, public trust, and the moral obligations of government. Few doubt that its implications will be final. What happens next is uncertain. Some in Westminster believe the Prime Minister will resign before the vote. Others insist he will fight on. even if it means bringing down his own party. What is beyond doubt is that Britain is now experiencing the most profound constitutional rupture since the abdication crisis of 1936. In the space of a single day, the fragile equilibrium between monarchy, parliament and the people has been tested to its limits. Historians will debate whether the king's action was courage or folly, an act of duty or a breach of neutrality. What they will not dispute is its significance. For the first time in living memory, a monarch has intervened directly in the machinery of government. A prime minister has defied him, and a nation long regarded as a model of quiet stability now finds itself in uncharted waters. As Britain waits for Monday's recall of Parliament and the King's televised address that will follow, one question hangs over Westminster. Has the Prime Minister merely lost his office, or has the entire balance of British democracy shifted beneath our feet?